Envy. It can creep into our awareness like a soft green tendril, unnoticed until it tightens around the heart. Buddhism calls this feeling out of the shadows by naming its roots: greed, lobha; aversion or hatred, dosa; and delusion, moha, are the three poisons or unwholesome roots of mind. Envy is born of greed, craving what another has, mixed with resentment and the delusion that their happiness somehow diminishes ours. In other words, envy is a symptom of the ego's habit of comparing and clinging. As Pema Chodron writes, we build protective walls around ourselves that are fortified by emotions of all kinds, jealousy and envy. Yet if we slow down and watch with gentle curiosity, envy can become a mirror, reflecting our own unmet needs and forgotten dreams rather than a flaw or moral failing. Buddha's way is not to blame or scold the heart for feeling envy, but to see it clearly and compassionately. We begin by mindful awareness, sati, simply noticing the sensation of envy in the moment. In the Noble Eightfold Path, right mindfulness is described as a quality that guards or watches over the mind, so that unwholesome states weaken. In practice, this might mean pausing, breathing, and acknowledging the green-eyed feeling with kindness, inviting it into awareness instead of pushing it away. Even Thich Nhat Hanh advises acknowledging and gently holding these difficult emotions like a baby, allowing envy to soften instead of fester. We can use tools like Tara Brach's RAIN, recognize, allow, investigate, nurture, bringing mindful compassion to the feeling. RAIN guides us in bringing mindfulness and compassion to difficult emotions. We recognize envy is here, allow its presence, gently explore its needs, and nurture ourselves with loving kindness. We also remember impermanence, anicca, and interdependence. Nothing we envy lasts forever. Another's success is made of changing conditions, and our own fortunes will change too. In fact, envy often occurs when we forget that everyone experiences joys and sorrows, and that all things are impermanent. And Buddhism's doctrine of non-self, anatta, reminds us there is no fixed I separate from others. The boundaries between me and you are fluid and interwoven. Dogen Zenji beautifully expressed this. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by the myriad things. In other words, as our sense of a separate self relaxes, we naturally feel more of others' joy and pain as our own. Our limited self-image expands into a wider heart. In this light, envy can be a teacher. The 17th Karmapataya Dorje notes that feeling envy is a sign we are alive, but acting on it only chases satisfaction, like quenching thirst with salt water. He points out that if we become rich, we envy the poor. If poor, we envy the rich. So feeding envy never satisfies. Instead of fighting envy, we use it as a cue to practice the antidotes: equanimity, upekkha; compassion, karuna; and especially sympathetic joy, mudita. Jack Cornfield calls mudita the third Brahma Vihara, or immeasurable love, the capacity to rejoice in another's happiness. He reminds us that the enemy of shared joy is comparison and jealousy, the mind that sees others' joy as a threat. In other words, as our sense of a separate self relaxes, we naturally feel more of others' joy and pain as our own. Our limited self-image expands into a wider heart. True mudita sees joy as expansive. Shared joy takes delight in the success and happiness of all, wishing everyone's happiness to grow. Our habitual reaction is to believe happiness is limited, so another's gain feels like our loss. But with practice, we learn that we can literally increase the conditions for our own joy. When others are happy, we really are happy. As Dogen observed, with ego loosened, all of you could be happy, and it would make me happy. Cultivating mudita is like planting seeds of joy that transform envy's thorns into flowers. To awaken mudita and compassion, we use our practice. We might visualize a friend's good fortune and watch what happens inside. Perhaps envy arises, that wriggling worm in the apple, as one teacher described it, followed by insecurity. Instead of cringing, we breathe through it and gently shift to love. We recall that the four immeasurables, Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, sympathetic joy, mudita, and equanimity, upekkha, are natural expressions of our basic awakened nature. Cultivating loving kindness might start with, "May you be happy," extending first to ourselves, then to others. Compassion allows us to understand the unhappiness beneath envy, perhaps a fear of scarcity or unworthiness. Sympathetic joy actively celebrates the good around us. Equanimity steadies the heart so it neither clings nor pushes away when difficult feelings arise. Together, these qualities transform the reasons we work to create change. Our motivation becomes one of inclusion rather than separation. We begin to see every success not as competition but as a drop in the ocean of shared beauty. And the ocean grows each time we rejoice for others. Throughout this process, we hold the right view, understanding karma and impermanence. We remember that every intention and action ripples outward. Buddha taught that our actions have consequences. Envy-driven actions, such as spite or gossip, create suffering. By contrast, wholesome intentions ripen in harmony. We also remember the mirror of interdependence. We are interconnected with everyone. There is no isolated self to protect. In moments of comparison, we recall emptiness, sunyata, that nothing has a separate, permanent essence. The person we envy is not a fixed rival, but a conditioned being like ourselves. Right intention then naturally follows. To renounce envy, to nurture compassion and joy, we practice leaving home, not in fleeing the world, but in abandoning the home of the ego, returning to each moment with an open heart. As we close this episode, let's breathe in presence. If envy arises again, we acknowledge it and gently let it pass. We remind ourselves of the wisdom. We cannot diminish another's light by lighting our own. In Pema Chodron's words, we can choose to stop, to slow down, to be still, and experiment with interrupting the usual chain reaction of envy. I leave you here with a quote by Mahagosananda to ponder on. May all beings be peaceful and happy and come to the end of suffering. With that tender wish, we let envy melt into kindness, returning to the present with an open and joyful heart. Thank you for being still with me, my friend.